Please, let's get a divorce. My husband suddenly said that. I stopped doing my chores, and my husband gave a sneaky grin. I'm taking over my mistress's company, so you're no longer needed. I nodded at my husband, who said that, as if to rub salt in the wound. Fine. Here's the divorce papers. Finally, I can be free from this husband. My name is Catherine, a 45-year-old office worker. We don't have any kids. My husband's name is Frank, and we both work as office workers, though at different companies. So we only see each other in the morning and at night. The daily frustration is that my husband does not help with housework at all. No matter how many times I ask him to help, he says he hasn't done it before and pushes all the troubles onto me. If that's all, it's fine, but it's infuriating that he gets sarcastic every time I do something. I have been devoted to my husband since our marriage, but his irrelevant attitude had recently turned me completely cold towards him. But I don't think about divorcing him. There's no reason big enough to make me want to divorce him. It sounds bad to call it as a habit, but my husband and I have been living like this for over 10 years. But there was a change for us. That is, my husband's attitude has been prickly recently. I was sick of his increased sarcasm, and I would find out the reason as to why my husband had changed that way in a few days. I went to work as usual that day. I had something to do at work, and I was going to leave the house earlier than usual. When I told my husband about it, he sneered and was being sarcastic. You're so inefficient. Are you really able to work? My husband laughed down at me with a snort. I held back my irritation in the morning and spoke out a little roughly, I'm leaving, and my husband sent me off without a reply. During lunch break, I was having lunch with my female colleagues who were friendly, and the rumor in the company came up. Did you know the CEO's daughter might finally get married? I think I was responding indifferently to my colleagues, who were all being excited. The CEO's daughter is a young woman named Elizabeth, who's 35 years old. She is said to be the successor, but she hasn't achieved noticeable results, so the executives don't seem to think well of her. Her father is also trying to arrange a marriage for her. Her boyfriend is suspicious. He might have a wife and children. I was surprised at those words. Everyone else was also saying, huh, and opening their eyes wide. Well, it seems that Elizabeth herself denies it, so it might be a lie. My colleagues laughed loudly as they said that, but I thought there was a possibility that such rumors would come out. In the evening, it was time to go home, so I headed out. I have to prepare dinner before my husband comes home or he will complain. And while I was heading home, I usually take the train to work, but I found my husband on the platform at the station. I was surprised to see him going home early, and as I walked towards him, a young woman ran up to him before me. I was surprised and completely froze there. And what's more surprising was that the woman was the rumored Elizabeth. I didn't understand why Elizabeth was snuggling up to him as if she was his lover. With a sense of disbelief in front of me, I secretly followed the two. As I followed, I realized the two were heading for a fancy restaurant. It was a restaurant where many couples would go for their dates, and I felt very dizzy. I took a deep breath and captured the two entering the restaurant in a photo on my mobile phone. And while I was standing there in a daze, I got a message from my husband. I'm going to have dinner with someone from the company today, so I don't need dinner. My husband was lying to me to have dinner with that woman. If he has nothing to hide, there should be no reason for him to lie to me. From this day on, I started suspecting my husband of infidelity. A few days after that, even though it was a holiday, my husband was quickly getting ready from early in the morning. I usually don't ask, but today I asked him, "Where are you going?" "I'm going to play golf with a colleague from the company." My husband's eyes were swimming as he said that, and I knew immediately that it was a lie. I didn't expect my husband to be so obviously disturbed. I wonder why I didn't notice it until now. Does that mean I had no interest in my husband? That makes me feel somewhat empty. My husband left the house quickly as if to run away from me. I can't just wait for my husband to come home. Just as dinner was about to be ready, I got a message from my husband. "I'll be home late tonight, so eat dinner without me." Upon reading the message, I let out a deep sigh. My husband was probably going to have dinner with his mistress again. I was beyond furious, but I simply replied to my husband saying, "Understood." I didn't want to provoke suspicion by confronting him unnecessarily. I decided to maintain my usual calm self and carry on with life as if it was normal. Later that night, when my husband came home, he was grinning suspiciously. "Did you have fun today?" "I heard some interesting news, but it's none of your business." My husband cheerfully handed me all his belongings. When I accepted his stuff, he headed to the bath with just his phone. "Should I hold your phone too?" I offered, but my husband refused. "I have to check my emails, even on my days off. Unlike you, I have responsibilities at work." I could hear his voice from the bathroom, and I thought he was lying. It's unlikely he'd be dealing with work matters on his personal phone. He probably just wanted to keep in touch with his mistress without me disturbing him. I felt my feelings for my husband cooling down more than ever. A month went on like this. My husband continued to meet with his mistress, and I had collected substantial evidence. I only had to confront him now, but I didn't know when would be the right time. Then one day, my husband suddenly said, "I'm quitting my job." What? This was the first time I heard about this, and I was a little taken aback. He couldn't possibly be quitting his job without discussing it with me. When I asked if he would start working soon, my husband looked at me with a displeased look. "I'm not like you. I'm competent. I'm only quitting because I was headhunted. And don't think that just because I'll be earning more, our lifestyle will improve. It won't." My husband smirked and started looking at his phone. It was clear that he was up to something, but I simply replied, "I see. When are you quitting?" "I've already submitted my resignation. Starting from tomorrow, I'll be joining a new company." Saying so, Frank headed towards his new company the next day. Since changing jobs, he seemed strangely cheerful. I tried asking him several times about his new company, but he wouldn't answer. "Stop nagging. Like you, I'm tired. Be more considerate." He tries to keep me away from him by saying such things like that. Feeling curious, I secretly checked his documents, only to discover that he had joined the same company as me. I was truly shocked and considered confronting him, but I held myself back. This could be useful. The next day, Frank, who usually left home early in the morning, came home at noon, which was very rare of him to do. Before I could welcome him, he hastily approached me. "I beg you, please, divorce me." Upon hearing his words, I stopped doing my housework, and he grinned widely. When I asked what had suddenly come up, he seemed to be delighted, perhaps thinking I was rattled. "I'm taking over my mistress's company, so I don't need you anymore." I was taken aback at the thought of Frank becoming a CEO. I held my breath in surprise. Frank, with a smug look on his face, started bragging. "Actually, I met a young woman at a bar, and while we were dating, she fell for me. So she introduced me to her father, who happened to be the CEO of a renowned company." What? "Her father seemed to like me and offered to let me take over his company. I couldn't miss such an opportunity, could I?" He was gleaming with excitement and spoke in a buoyant tone as if he was narrating a dream. I was infuriated by his lack of remorse, but he didn't care about my feelings and just kept grinning. "Tomorrow the CEO is going to introduce me to everyone at the meeting as the new CEO. I feel so relieved to finally be able to break up with a woman like you who's only aging away. And just so you know, I won't accept a refusal to divorce. If that happens, I'll hire a lawyer and sue you." And I was shocked that he, the one who cheated, had the audacity to sue me. I was utterly disgusted with my husband's self-centeredness. But this might be a good opportunity, I thought, holding back a smile, determined not to let this chance slip away. "Sure. Here are the divorce papers." Saying that, I took the divorce papers out of the drawer. My name was already filled in. At my unexpected preparedness, my husband was taken aback. Why the hell did you prepare this? Are you really okay with this? My flustered husband was demanding answers. Even though he was the one who brought it up, I wondered why he was so agitated. Did you really think I wouldn't notice anything about your affair? After I tossed a few photos on top of the divorce papers, Frank made a face as if he couldn't believe it. While he was out with his mistress, I had contacted a detective agency to gather evidence. I have all the evidence. You can do as you please about becoming the CEO, but I'll be sure to get division of property. When I said that, he stood there with his mouth open. However, soon enough he began to smirk as usual. Oh, really? If you knew, it saves us more time. I can afford to pay alimony. After all, I'm going to be the CEO. Seeing his smug smile, I thought that him being able to laugh like that would only last for a little bit. I was thinking of executing my plan with this conversation as a starting point. I wouldn't simply accept division of property and let it end at that. Stress that had accumulated for over 10 years could not be relieved with such a matter. Becoming the CEO means that you won't need this house, right? Of course. I'm being taken in as a son-in-law into a mansion. I'll be able to enjoy the luxury that you could never taste even in your whole life. Then I'll sell this house, okay? When I said that coldly, he answered, yeah, in an uninterested way. Even though I'm going to be a CEO and live happily with a young wife, you may get division of property, but you're destined to live alone. How pathetic. Don't bother trying to find a partner, okay? An old woman like you won't be anyone's choice. It'll only make you a laughingstock. Well, have a good life. His irritating remarks were no longer painful or annoying to me. Don't think that this will end easily like that. After I said that, Frank, mistaking it as words of frustration, laughed out loud while holding his stomach. That day I packed up and moved out by the evening. He also packed his car and headed off to his mistress's place in a hurry. The remaining furniture and house were already sold. With the money from the sales, I headed to the apartment I had previously had my eye on. A few days later, I attended an important executive meeting where the CEO was to decide his successor. While setting up the equipment, I called out to my senior colleagues. Apparently, they were discussing whose computer they were going to use. Please, use mine, I suggested, bringing out my own laptop. I'm the one who prepared today's documents, so everything is organized. With this, my preparations were complete. All that remained was for the CEO and the executives to gather. An hour later, the CEO and executives took their seats. I waited, ready to operate the computer as the meeting progressed. As I mentioned earlier, I've brought our successor candidate with me today. I believe you all know him, but let me reintroduce him. As the CEO finished his sentence, my husband walked in, wearing a wide smile. Next to him, Elizabeth was also smiling, elegantly. My husband strolled in, a confident grin on his face. However, the moment he noticed me operating the computer, he blurted out a startled, "Huh? What's wrong?" Elizabeth asked him, to which my husband quickly recovered and brushed it off with a, "It's nothing. Could you display his information, please?" Smiling to myself, I followed his instruction and projected onto the screen the incriminating evidence of my husband's infidelity. This was my plan. Even if my thick-headed husband paid division of property, he wouldn't reflect back to his own actions and what he had done. That's why I wanted to expose my husband's ugliness in front of a lot of people and have him reflect back to his own actions even if he didn't want to. The atmosphere in the conference room instantly changed. Both my husband and the CEO were stunned, their faces turning red as they stared at the screen. Is something wrong? This is his information. I think it might be faster if you look at this. Oh, by the way, I'm his ex-wife. I was quite surprised when he suddenly mentioned about divorce yesterday. He was so excited about becoming the CEO. As I spoke nonchalantly, my ex-husband frantically approached me, raising his hand towards me. I braced myself for the impact, clenching my teeth and refusing to avert my eyes. But his hand was quickly restrained by a security officer. "Explain what is going on." the CEO demanded in a low voice. My husband, restrained by the security officer nearby, turned pale as he stared at the CEO. "Don't say anything unnecessary," my ex-husband warned me as he glared at me. I smiled back at him and argued back. "Unnecessary? Like how you cheated on me with Elizabeth?" Upon hearing this, my husband's face turned even more pale. The CEO, Elizabeth, and all the executives who were present there held their breath, looking at my husband. "That's not true. She's just trying to sabotage the meeting." Seeing my husband struggle to turn off the computer, I quickly switched the screen, displaying a photo of him at the train station acting intimately with Elizabeth. After seeing this, I started to investigate about my ex-husband and found out he was cheating. I've put up with his sarcastic comments for over 10 years, but his affair was the last straw for me. As I explained, Elizabeth looked agitated and glared at my husband. "You told me you were single." It seemed that she didn't know. Frank was scolded by the CEO, saying, "What the hell is this?" And he shrank back in fear. "When did you start seeing each other?" "A year ago. I met him at a pub I was taken to by a friend. I had no idea he had a wife he'd been with for over 10 years." I couldn't believe my ears when I heard what Elizabeth had said. When I glared at Frank, he became awkward and his eyes swam. Then the CEO began to approach him. "Good thing I found out before I declared you as my successor. You know what's going to happen now, don't you?" "Wait a minute, you can't mean—" "I can't have a man who lied about being single and deceived my daughter as the CEO." The CEO's angry voice echoed throughout the conference room. Hearing those words, Frank collapsed perilously to his knees. I felt sorry for Elizabeth, who was standing stunned in silence near a guy like Frank. "I can't believe you were that kind of person. Let's discuss the engagement in a proper place. Don't you dare think that you can stay in this company after doing this." The CEO said that and instructed Frank and Elizabeth to leave. He tried to say something, but the CEO glared at him and turned pale again, so he stumbled out of the conference room. I felt refreshed watching him being in that kind of state. "Don't think you can get away with this too, all right?" The CEO said that, looking bitter at me. He must have had mixed feelings about me humiliating him about his family to the public. I do feel sorry for causing such a fuss in an important meeting. However, I didn't want to let Frank off the hook. "I truly apologize for causing such an inconvenience in an important meeting. I intend to take responsibility for causing this disturbance and resign from the company." When I said that, the CEO nodded and gestured for me to leave. I left the conference room as instructed. I loved this job, but since I got to get my revenge, I have no regrets. As I left the company, Frank, with his pale face, pushed past the security and ran towards me. "Don't think you can get away with this." "Shouldn't you be more worried about losing your job and your house?" When I said that, he let out a pathetic, "Ugh." Yes, I sold off his house. Due to this incident, he has made the CEO angry, and he will probably be kicked out of the mansion after the engagement is broken off. Understanding that, Frank quickly changed his attitude and clung to me. Please, I have no savings. I can't afford to run a house. Please help me." "Why don't you have any savings?" Because I was going to be the CEO. I had a huge celebration. I wouldn't have been dumped like this if you hadn't done this. You better take responsibility for this." "What are you talking about? The one who should take responsibility is you, isn't it?" As I coldly replied back, he was led away by the security guard, holding back tears. Now I have nothing left to do. I felt refreshed thinking that I was finally free from a guy like Frank. Later I quit the job and started looking for a new job. As for Frank, he was kicked out of the mansion because the engagement with Elizabeth was broken off, and he was told by the CEO to quit the company. There was constant gossip in the company, and it was said that Frank left the company, while everyone gave him the cold shoulder. I heard that Frank had to settle in a small apartment. He had to pay Elizabeth and I compensation for the damages caused, and his life was said to be a struggle. Recently I heard that he is struggling with debt. I live a short distance away from my previous workplace. Luckily, I found a new job, so I'm not having any trouble making a living. Because of the incident, I had to distance myself from my kind colleagues, but I still have no regrets on what I did. Now I'm enjoying a stress-free life while working hard at my new job. My daughter is joining the company, so I need you to resign. Today is your last day. It was on the morning of the 20th that I was suddenly told by the president that I was fired. Huh? But I was surprised and at a loss for words. The 20th was the payment day to our suppliers. Although there were bank transfers for some long-standing suppliers, I would go and make direct payments, also serving as a courtesy call. You look like you can go home right away. I'll give you the day off especially for you, so leave quickly. I was pushed forcefully from behind out of the office, and the door was shut with a snap right in front of my nose. I had no idea where to start objecting. My name is Emily. I joined this family-owned paving company right after high school and have been a clerical worker for 10 years. Or rather, I should say I was a clerical worker until just now. There were about 20 employees, and when the current chairman was the president, the workplace atmosphere was good, and it was a very easy company to work for. Even the chairman, who has now retired from the field, used to work proactively with the younger employees, and Catherine, his wife, would come to the company every day to handle miscellaneous tasks until the chairman was hospitalized. Kelly, their daughter, was a versatile person who could handle both field and office work, and her husband, as the site manager, was trusted by the employees who worked on site. Just because they were the founding family, nobody acted haughty or looked down on the employees. It would have been nice if the enjoyable and trouble-free company life had continued as it was, but unfortunately reality was not so sweet. At the end of last year, cancer was discovered in the chairman during the company's group medical examination, and he decided to retire as president, appointing Kelly's husband, the site manager, as the next president. Both myself and the other employees unanimously agreed. Everyone agreed that the chairman should focus on treatment, and that they wanted him to live a long life. However, suddenly the chairman's eldest son, Tom, who I didn't know where he heard the news from, appeared with his family. It seems that the chairman had another child besides Kelly. Tom had been disowned about 30 years ago, and I didn't know about it at all. According to the senior employees, Tom was a notorious bad guy in his youth, and he was often in trouble with the police. Whenever he caused problems, it seemed that the chairman and Catherine would go and apologize. After dropping out of high school, he started engaging in multi-level marketing and fraudulent-like activities, and the chairman finally disowned him. Despite having been out of touch for a long time, Tom suddenly showed up one day, shouting, "Dad, I was wrong all this time. Forgive me," and pleaded before the chairman. I was shocked. Since the company was small and there was only one room for both, the president's office and the clerical room, I witnessed the whole thing and remember it well. Tom said that he wanted to let bygones be bygones and work together in the company. But I think that's not a phrase to be said by someone who's been disowned. "I apologize to everyone, but I beg you, I want you to give Tom one more chance." Kelly and the veteran employees seemed unable to fully rejoice since they knew about Tom's past, but no one could refuse when the chairman pleaded like that. Thus, Tom's family came to live in the annex of the chairman's house, and Tom became an employee, while his wife took charge of the household chores as a housewife. The daughter seemed to be a college student, and I only saw her once when she came to the company. The chairman said, "Having struggled in the world, Tom must have become decent now." Catherine was also crying with joy that Tom had come back with his family. They were talking about building up the company together from now on. But then a problem arose. Tom insisted, "I'm the eldest son, so I should be the next president." and the relationship with Kelly and the site manager became strained. In front of the chairman, he pretended to work hard, but in reality, he did nothing. He kept making power harassment-like comments such as, "Physical labor is what the workers do," and "You are worker ants. Work in silence." He was quickly disliked by everyone. Some of the younger employees even went directly to the chairman to say, "I can't work like this." But both the chairman and Catherine only pleaded and said, "We will scold Tom, so please look at this with a longer perspective." Then, whether due to stress or something else, the chairman's cancer suddenly worsened, and he was hospitalized 3 months ago. Then Tom declared, "I am the president." The employees advised the chairman and Catherine to make the site manager the president as originally planned, but in the end they chose Tom, their blood relative, over their daughter's husband. Some people even started to grumble, saying things like, "They're blinded by parental love," or "They've become senile." The once harmonious and joyful atmosphere of the company completely changed, and it became all tense and awkward. Everyone thought that things couldn't continue like this, and finally Kelly started to take action with the site manager behind the scenes. Consequently, I ended up being the only one handling the company's administrative tasks. Until now, it was Catherine, Kelly, and me, so I could leave on time, but now I have to work overtime every day. It's not unusual for the date to change before I leave. Even so, Tom seems to think that administrative work is just a leisurely task. The president himself spends his time going to hostess bars during the day or going out to bet on horse races or go gambling. My relationship with the president deteriorated dramatically due to an issue with an expense. He used the company's credit card for his private dining and entertainment expenses, and to some extent I have been turning a blind eye to it. But this time it was at an unacceptable level. I braced myself for his anger and handed the receipt back to the president. "This expense cannot be approved." "What? Why?" "This is your wife's corrective underwear. It has nothing to do with the business, so it cannot be expensed." As expected, the president's face turned red with anger. "Don't mess with me. She's the president's wife. It's only natural for her to dress up. It's an expense." "No, but it's underwear. And your wife isn't an employee either," I stammered in reply, wondering how the president could think that a $4,000 expense for his wife's corrective underwear could possibly be justified as a business expense. What he said next was even more incomprehensible to me. "Then let's make the sale of corrective underwear our new business venture. That way it will be considered a purchase, so it's an expense." The president looked smug as if he had come up with a brilliant idea, but I was dumbfounded. We are a paving company." "So what? We can tell our clients that if they don't buy from us, we'll cut off their contracts. Everyone will buy. We'll make a fortune. $2,000 for one, $4,000 for a set. It's an easy business." The president laughed loudly, but I was horrified. "That's absolutely unacceptable. It will cause a credibility issue." In my anger, I snapped at him, and from that moment on I became the target of the president's disdain. From that day forward, I was constantly berated by the president. It was so hard that I considered quitting many times, but I continued to endure and work, motivated by my desire to help the chairman, who had taken care of me, and my concern that everyone else would be in trouble if I left. The reality was, I would be in trouble too if I suddenly lost my job. I thought I would just endure it until I was ready to move on, but then I was abruptly fired. If I quit suddenly now, it will cause trouble for our clients. I took a deep breath and opened the door. "I can't do this. I can't just quit on such short notice. Without any handover, even your daughter can't do the work. Besides, today is the payment day." I said all this in one breath, expecting the president to become furious. As I thought, the president's face turned red with rage. "Shut up. I told you to quit because my daughter is joining the company. Today is your last day. As for the payment, just let them wait until they come to collect it. There's no need to pay them proactively." Excuse me? Isn't it normal to pay for something once you buy it? I was so taken aback that I explained it like I would to a child, only for the president to say something so unreasonable that I couldn't believe he was a rational adult. If that's the case, just threaten to change to another supplier. Tell them we won't go to make the payment this time, so they should give it to us for free. What? That's not something we can do, is it? I was so flabbergasted that I was at a loss for words. You're utterly useless. My daughter has a college degree. She can easily do office work. Since she's family, she won't complain about what I buy. Unlike you, who's all talk and no action. We don't need someone like you in our company. Get out now. In other words, the president is probably thinking that by having his daughter handle the accounting, he can easily write off his personal expenses as company expenses. Oh, is that so? Just remember, I won't regret it. It's hopeless. Words are no longer effective. My patience has finally run out. I gathered my personal belongings and left the company in a hurry. But still I felt bad for our clients. I called Kelly. I knew Catherine was busy nursing the chairman, and Kelly was also occupied, but this was an emergency. I explained the situation and left the rest to Kelly. Once I left the company, I suddenly found myself with nothing to do. Being fired without notice is a clear violation of the labor standards law. If I report it to the labor standards office, they are done for. Since our company was enrolled in the middle company payment system, I can claim my severance pay and 1 month's salary. The middle company payment system is a government severance pay system for small and medium-sized enterprises, a strong ally for companies that can't prepare severance pay on their own. But I don't need to rush the process since I can apply within 5 years from the date of retirement. And the statute of limitations for the Labor Standards Office is 2 years. Due to my professional habits and office work, I calculated the necessary procedures and schedule for retirement and concluded that I could take it easy for at least a week. Lately, I've been constantly working overtime and on weekends, unable to do anything at home. And there are many places I wanted to visit once I settled down. So I decided to go on a day trip to the beach. After refreshing myself at the beach, I checked my smartphone in the locker and found several missed calls, emails, and voicemails. Checking the email, I found a message from Kelly saying, "The payment went smoothly. Everything is prepared." I was relieved. Even though the president suddenly told me to quit, I felt guilty for leaving my job in anger. Next, I listened to the voicemail from the company. It was the panicked voice of the president saying, "Hey, what's going on? You're saying I'm not the real president? Did you know this? Explain yourself properly." As he finally realized, what a stupid president. I couldn't help but smirk. Then I checked my emails and voicemails one by one, listened to a voicemail from the chairman, and promptly decided to go to the hospital. When I arrived at the chairman's hospital room in the evening, not only was Catherine there, but the president was there as well. As soon as the chairman saw me, he abruptly greeted me on the bed. "Emily, I'm truly sorry for my foolish son." "Hey, what's going on? I'm not the official president. Explain yourself." Tom was arrogantly shouting, unable to grasp the situation, but the chairman quickly shouted him down. "You, be quiet." It seems that right after I called Kelly, she immediately contacted the chairman and Catherine. Upon hearing this, the chairman hurriedly called Tom, the president, and asked, "Don't you really know anything? So what's going on?" I calmly spilled the beans to the president, who was shouting without understanding the situation, saying, "Basically, Tom, you had no legal influence. You were a president in name only. It might be a confusing and unclear story without knowledge, but president is a term that indicates a role within the company, not a role defined by law. The one who represents the company and has external responsibility is the representative director, and it is entirely different from a mere president. The title of president alone can be freely changed within the company, but to change the representative director, complex procedures are necessary, and it's quite a hassle. 3 months ago, when it was decided that Tom would become president, there was intense opposition from Kelly, the site manager, and veteran employees. So I proposed a method to make Tom a nominal president, while keeping the chairman as the representative director. As a clerk, I knew about the difficulty of the procedures and the laws related to the company, so I came up with this method. If Tom changed his heart and worked seriously and was accepted by all employees, only then would we begin the legal procedures. Conversely, if Tom was deemed unfit to be the president, the plan was to either to dismiss him or close the company, with Kelly and the site manager preparing to start a new company. Kelly didn't think Tom's personality would change. The chairman and Catherine had believed in Tom until the end, but it seems they were awakened when Tom unjustly dismissed me. If you want to be an entrepreneur, study hard and take care of your employees. I told you many times. It's not a big deal, isn't it? We can just do the procedures now, right? No, it's impossible. You see, our company gives company stock to employees who desire it, and most of them have it. Emily owns 10%, so she's a major shareholder in our company. We can't ignore Emily's opinions, and the other employees who own company stock will certainly not side with you. Gradually absorbing the situation, the president's face turns pale. What? But I have stocks too, right? 0. I was planning to give you my shares once you truly became president. I'm deeply disappointed in you. You were only after my wealth, thinking that I have only a little time left. Weren't you? The chairman slumps in despair, and Catherine also falls silent with a sad look on her face. The president brazenly retorts, "Huh, of course, I'm the eldest son. What's wrong with taking what I can get? The company is mine." I couldn't forgive him any longer. No, that's not correct. The chairman holds full responsibility as the representative director of the company. Plus, I'm a shareholder. I can request a shareholders' meeting and seek the president's dismissal. Understanding the word dismissal, the president turns pale rapidly. You mean I might get fired? Damn, weren't you just an office worker? Tom, Emily is right. Now that things have come to this, no one will stand by you. Only Emily spoke up to give you a chance. Catherine then opens her mouth. Emily, I truly owe you an apology. I'm sorry for causing you trouble out of love for my son. Please tell me what you'd like to do. I look at the president. President, I don't want to work under you anymore, so I'll quit right now. However, I will take my severance pay, and I want you to pay my 1 month's salary, including unpaid overtime and holiday work. I will also report to the Labor Standards Office, and as a shareholder, I will fight thoroughly to remove anyone harmful to the company. As I smile and speak, the president turns from pale to completely white. I go on to tell about how Kelly had been visiting clients and successfully promoting our new company. Most clients have given up on our current company and have decided to switch to the new one. Almost all of our employees are also planning to move to the new company. That's impossible. I'll sue you, the president threatens, almost in tears, but the chairman dismisses him. I am the representative director. You have no such rights. Then the president can no longer stand and collapses to his knees. I feel indescribable. Mr. President, it's a shame that this happened. If you had changed your attitude when you returned, it wouldn't have come to this. There were many chances to understand if he had repeatedly tried, researched, and studied. The one who squandered the opportunity was none other than the president himself, a complete case of reaping what he sowed. Later on, eventually, the chairman closed down the company, and Tom became unemployed. The president's wife started selling corrective underwear, but it didn't sell at all. They were reported for malicious door-to-door sales and were eventually arrested for pyramid scheming. When Kelly returned to her parents' house for an errand, there seemed to be several boxes left filled with the forceful underwear. The daughter seems to have found employment at another company, though the details are unknown. I now work at Kelly's and the site manager's new company, and I can work happily every day. I want to continue to cherish my relationships with people and live sincerely. Go home, you broke old hag. Who do you think you are, coming to the trip for free? I was astonished at my family as usual. I'll show you how. I decided to punish them. While I was away from my family enjoying some peace and quiet, my younger brother called me. Hey, what did you do, sis? My name is Karen, a 30-year-old office worker. I have a boyfriend of 3 years. His name is Adam, a wonderful man who is very gentle, caring, and considerate. We met when we were in university. He was a senior when I was a junior. Whenever I had some work or personal troubles, often confided in him. Every time he would listen empathetically to my stories and gave me sound advice. After graduation, we would meet up regularly, and one day he confessed his feelings to me, and we started dating. Since then, we have been getting along well, and I was thinking one day we will marry. One day he finally proposed to me. Karen, I want to be with you forever, so will you marry me? Yes. And so we decided to get married. We soon went to announce our marriage to our respective families. I'm pleased to see you. I'm Karen. Oh, I'm glad we finally got to meet. Oh, Adam has talked about you a lot. He was right. You're such a lovely girl. Ah, stop. I'm blushing. Oh, please don't be. Come in, come in. Thank you. Adam had lost his father a few years ago, and now only his mother was left in his family home. I was very anxious about whether I would get along with my mother-in-law and whether she would like me, but I was relieved to find that she was a very kind and wonderful person. We had a delightful conversation over some tea and sweets. Karen is such a good girl. I'm so happy she'll be Adam's wife. His mother praised me very much. I'd never received so much compliments like this before, so I didn't know how to react and felt a little puzzled. We're looking forward to your wedding. See you, Mom. Thank you for today. The wedding greetings went well with a friendly atmosphere, and I felt relieved. But next, I had to introduce him to my family. Just thinking about it made me feel blue. You see, I don't really like my family that much. The reason is how my parents treated me since I was a child. Both of my parents were good at sports, with my mother doing track and field and my father playing soccer. Because they were both at a level to get recommended to university, they had high expectations for their own children to exceed in sports as well. But I didn't have the athletic ability that my parents hoped for. They tried to put me in various sports lessons, hoping I would exceed in something. I remember they made me play basketball, swimming, table tennis, and even figure skating. However, I had fundamentally poor athletic ability. Well, I might be considered average from a general perspective, but it was far from the level needed to pursue excellence. As a result, my parents were frustrated. In the midst of this, my younger brother Kenny was born. My parents expected that there were many sports in which boys could exceed, so they tried to make my brother participate in sports as well. Then my brother showed talent in soccer. When the coach of the local youth soccer team said, "This kid is a genius," My parents were over the moon and began devoting all their love to my brother. Kenny is truly a genius. He takes after us, after all. Their words implied that I was an ordinary person and that they did not want to admit that I was their child. No matter what my parents did, they favored my brother and didn't care about me. I went to middle school and then to high school, but they still did not care. Even when I worked hard and achieved decent grades, my parents denied my efforts, saying, even if you're good at studying, it's meaningless. I told my parents that I wanted to attend college, but they said, we can't pay for your tuition. You have to go on your own. I went to college on a scholarship. On the other hand, my brother continued to shine in soccer and got accepted into a high school on a soccer recommendation. My parents were ecstatic about this too. With this, he'll undoubtedly go pro. I'll do anything for Kenny. Growing up loved and adored that way by my parents, my brother inevitably looked down on me. Says you really are an incompetent, attract poverty to yourself type of person, aren't you? Even mom and dad don't like you. If it weren't for you, mom and dad would be more invested in me. You are a real pain in the ass. My brother used to bully me like that, and my parents never stopped him, but instead cursed with him together. She's such a trouble. A money pit is a person like you, right? I had lost all confidence in myself after being told such things by my own family. I did my best in my studies and went on to a reasonably good university and got a job at a big company with a high salary, but my low self-esteem was still low as ever. And me going to college and being hired at a big company would be instantly forgotten because of Kenny's success. Kenny was selected to go on to college as well as high school with a soccer recommendation. My parents were even more proud of my brother who, like them, had started a life career in sports. I was already working by then, but it was hard for me to save money every day because I had to pay back my scholarship. My brother stayed at home with his parents and received lots of love from them while attending college and continuing to play soccer. However, the road to becoming a professional soccer player was not easy. In the end, when it came time for him to graduate from college, he was still unable to become a professional soccer player and had to find a job. Our parents were still very proud of him, and he continued to live at home with his parents, getting along well with them. My parents always made me participate in their New Year's gatherings, but they explained to my relatives that I was a bad daughter and my brother was proud son. But Karen is a good girl too. Working at a big company, you should be so proud. Even though my relatives would say that to me, my parents would just deny and say, no, no, no. Kenny is many times more amazing than her. I always feel disappointed when I see my parents act that way. My family treats me so poorly. I stopped attending New Year's gatherings, so I was very hesitant to let Adam, my dear fiancé, meet them. I have already told Adam about my parents and my brother and how poor their attitude is. However, he wanted to make a proper wedding greeting, so I decided to go back to my parents' house for the first time in several years. I called my mother to tell her about the marriage. What? No, long time no see, or how are you? Just what I expected. Daughter calling her for the first time in a few years, and this is the reaction I get. Can you hurry up and tell me what you want? Uh, um, I'm getting married. Uh, so, uh, um, he wants to say hi to you. So I was wondering if you'd meet with him. Why do I have to go through all that trouble? If you want to get married, you can go ahead and do that on your own. No, I was disappointed in my mother's cold attitude. But then I heard a voice over the phone that sounded like my brother's. Mom, who are you talking to? It's Taryn. She said she's getting married and wanted to bring her fiance to say hello. Wow, that sounds interesting. I want to see how dull the other guy is, so let's meet him. Really? Well, if you say so. She picked up the phone and said, hello. You can come and say hello. I had mixed feelings because I could hear their conversation, but he still wanted to say hello, so I decided to go to my parents' house on my next day off. Be prepared for some really bad behavior. I look forward to it. If the conversation over the phone is true, like you said, wow. It's not funny. I've had some really bad experiences. Sorry, but if we're going to get married, I'm going to have to meet your family. Let's just talk quickly and go home. Okay. So we drove to my parents' house. When we arrived at my parents' house, I pressed the intercom, but no one greeted me. When I arrived at the living room, I found my family all sitting together on the sofa. I was surprised to see a young woman whom I did not know at the time. I thought I had to say hello first. I'm home. Long time no see. This is my fiance, Adam. Nice to meet you. When I introduced him, everyone in the family looked at him. I thought he'd be more plain and dull. He's surprisingly decent. Kenny was rude right from the start. Adam was laughing. What about that woman next to you, Kenny? Is she your girlfriend? I called in advance about bringing my fiance and he brought an irrelevant woman. I was astonished by how much he has no common sense. That's my wife, Mira. She's been living here with me since we got married. What? Your wife? My eyes were widened with surprise. Wait a minute, Kenny, you were married? Yeah, last year. Wait, I didn't know that. I raised my voice involuntarily, and our mother made a disgusted face. You're a picky kid, aren't you? You don't have anything to do with Kenny's marriage, so there's no need to tell you. Uh, no. My brother had gotten married and nobody told me. I was shocked and froze on the spot. Then my father spoke to Adam. Like I care, but what do you do for a living? I know it's not much of a job since you're marrying Karen, but I'll ask you anyway. My father's words brought me back to myself. I would not allow my precious fiancé to be made fun of. I clenched my fists with anger, but Adam noticed and lightly restrained me with his hand. Apologies, how rude of me to not introduce myself. This is who I am. Adam Ban handed his business card to my father. My father looked at the card with a disgusted look. Then his eyes widened. Lawyer? My father shouted, and my whole family and Kenny's new wife was all in shock. This is amazing. Mother, get him some tea, quickly. Yes. Wow, a real lawyer? Cool. My family members blatantly changed their attitudes. Adam also rolled his eyes in dismay. Man, I never would have imagined that Karen will be marrying a lawyer. Why didn't she say so? Is the salary really good? Please buy me a fancy bag or something for my birthday. I was appalled at my family, who were not shy about making such comments. As for my brother's wife, she's too impudent. How can she say such a thing to my fiance when you've never even met me before? Adam was laughing as he answered, "We're going to be a family now, so let's take care of each other." My mother said so, but I had a very bad feeling. Then my parents and my brother and his wife actively participated in the meeting of both families. They talked a lot in front of me, so Adam's mother was indeed a bit taken aback. I apologized to his mother after the meeting, but his mother seemed to have heard from Adam and said with a smile, "Don't worry about it." I was relieved for the time being. Adam's mother is really a good person. About 2 months later, Adam and I had our wedding ceremony. All of my family, who had treated me so poorly and never wanted to be involved with me, came to the wedding. After the wedding, they began to contact me more frequently. "Would you and your husband like to have dinner with us sometime? I know a great restaurant." That's how my mother will start the call. She was probably trying to get me because my husband is a lawyer and makes a lot of money. But I would not fall for her scheme. I'm a little busy, so I don't think I'll be able to make it. I'll let you know when I can make it again. Okay, I'll wait for your call. Anytime is okay, Celeste. I was so disgusted with my mother, who said this in a bouncy voice. Apparently, she doesn't care about me and just wanted to take advantage of the fact that I married a rich man. After a few months of not contacting her, she called me again and said, "Hey, Karen, when are you going to get together with us?" My mother says that way in a wheedling tone of voice. "I'm sorry, I've been a little busy." When I was about to hang up the phone, "We're talking about celebrating my 60th birthday," she said. "We've been paying for your high school education and your father and I have been supporting you, haven't we? I think it's only right that you return the favor a little." Reading between the lines, I could sense her trying to say, "Pay us back." But what my mother said was true. I went to college on my own, but my parents had supported me through my life up to high school. It might be necessary for me to return the favor to my mother when she turns 60 years old. All right, we'll join in the celebration. Really? Ben, we are planning a family vacation, so let's go together. A family vacation? I didn't like the idea, but I thought it would give my husband and I some time alone together. I told my husband and he agreed, so we decided to join the family trip. When I told my mother about it, she was overjoyed. "Well, I'll send you the links of the hotels we want to stay at, the plans, other things on the internet." What? Then she sent me many links. I had no choice but to look at the contents. I found many websites of luxury hotels and restaurants. I wondered how extravagant she was planning this trip. I was appalled by the family's endless attempts to collect money from us, but I thought this would be the first and the last time, so I proceeded to make the reservations. My mother was overjoyed when I called her to tell her that The reservation was complete. I'm looking forward to it. Thank you. The day of the family trip to celebrate her 60th birthday arrived. This time we planned a trip to Kyoto. We boarded the plane and headed for Kyoto. My parents and my brother and his wife looked very happy. When we arrived at the airport, my husband and I said we were going our separate ways and parted ways with them. They seemed to be trying to get us to buy souvenirs and stuff and wanted us to go around with them, but I managed to dodge their attempts and we went on our own. We went our separate ways and met in front of a fancy restaurant where we had made reservations for dinner. Time flew by as my husband and I enjoyed sightseeing. Then we went to the fancy restaurant. My parents and my brother and his wife were already in front of the restaurant. "You're late." "No, but we still have 10 minutes until our reservation." When I replied, my mother and brother suddenly changed their attitude. "I'm not talking to you." "What?" "Oh, yeah, we're only here for you, Adam. Thank you for paying for our dinner at such a fancy restaurant and our stay at a fancy hotel." "What?" My husband rolled his eyes, not understanding what she was talking about. Then my brothers turned to me this time. "You're done here, sis." "What?" "I'm saying Adam's parasite has no right to have a good time." "Hey, what are you talking about?" While still being confused, they started to shout out. "Go home, you broke old hag. Who the hell do you think you are coming along on a free trip?" As usual, I was astonished at my family. "I see, so that's how it is. So they were going to exclude me from the beginning. I'll show you guys how." I decided to punish them. I whispered to Adam, "Okay, I'll leave you." My parents and my brother and his wife looked triumphant. They then took my husband into the restaurant. Then I quickly made some arrangements. Luckily, a good hotel had a cancellation and had a vacancy. So I made a reservation there and I checked right then. I checked in and took a relaxing bath in a hotel with a great view. I was relaxing a bit away from my family when I received a phone call from my brother. "Hey, what did you do, sis? What's wrong?" "I'll tell you what's wrong. Adam disappeared." "I don't know anything about that." "Don't be silly. You said something when you were whispering in his ear, didn't you?" He's usually an idiot, but he's got a good instinct for that kind of thing. "Yeah, well, it's no big deal. I told him I'll be staying at a different hotel, so to come over anytime." "Don't be silly. Adam, she said he got a phone call before the food came, got up from his seat, and didn't come back. He didn't come back until the end, and we had to pay for that expensive food and drink." "Oh, really? But it's your mother's 60th birthday celebration. Isn't it normal for you to pay?" "Shut up. I'm going to charge you for it later." With that, my brother hung up the phone. Soon after that, my husband came to the hotel where I was staying. He was smiling at me. "How is he? Was he mad?" "He was very furious." "You were originally going to take care of the flight, the restaurant, and the hotel bill, but then they misunderstood and said something like that to you. Those people are beyond saving." My husband was indeed stunned. We got ourselves together and went to the hotel's high-class restaurant and enjoyed our meal. We went back to our room, relaxed, and welcomed the next morning. We woke up early and enjoyed sightseeing. We didn't want our flight time to conflict with our parents, so we changed our flight time and left early. While my husband and I were waiting for our flight to board, my phone was blowing up with numerous calls from my mother. Hello, what's wrong? I thought you didn't want me. What the hell is going on? Why aren't you paying for our accommodations? Because that's how I made the reservation. Don't be silly. I can't pay $700 per person. You had a good time. You should pay for it. Unless, of course, you want to get caught. That's enough. You are a parasite. And you're smug. You're the parasite. I was going to pay for this family vacation with all the money I've saved as a way of repaying you for all the support you've given me. It's your fault that you misunderstood and turned me away. What? Did you plan to pay for your own accommodation and food and drink? That's what I'm saying. Oh no, there's no way you can afford that much money. Don't underestimate me. I work for the head office of a big company, and I'm a section chief there. I have quite a bit of money saved up, and my monthly salary is a lot higher than my father's. What? My mother was absolutely stunned when she learned the truth. But it doesn't matter anymore. I decided to cut them off completely. I've got a plane ticket, so I'll see you later. Oh, hey! I hung up the phone and blocked all calls from my family's numbers. Fortunately, I didn't tell them where I worked or where we lived, so my family weren't able to reach me. But the idiot family stormed into the lawyer's office listed on the business card my husband gave them. They demanded to see my husband and interrupted his business. My brother even broke some equipment there, which was reported to the police. They were arrested. They had to pay for the damage and fines after spending so much money on a family vacation. And because of the arrest, both my father and brother were fired from their jobs. Now, they're all working part-time or as freelancers, living unwealthy lives and bickering constantly with each other. They really are idiots and they deserve it. Alternatively, my husband and I are still living happily and I got pregnant. I gave birth to a beautiful baby girl and rejoiced over the birth of my daughter with my husband and mother-in-law. I will continue to cherish this family, my husband, my mother-in-law, and my daughter, and will live and enjoy happily ever after.
Hey, have you been drinking again? This is the third time this week. When I think about coming home to an old hag like you, it tires me out. I can't stand it unless I drink. It's been every weekend recently, and now it's even on weekdays. Men have social obligations, you know. I'm working too, you know. Once in a while, you could come home early, and at least talk to our son, Kevin. I don't care. Taking care of the kid is a wife's job. These days, this seems to be the only conversation I have with my husband. 12 years into marriage, and I'm still dealing with my husband's wasteful spending habits every day. My name is Catherine, 36 years old. Even after getting married, I continued working. My husband is 2 years older than me. So naturally, since we are aging together after marriage, if he calls me an old hag, I can't help but think, isn't he an old geezer too? But even if I retort the same way, it would only result in a quarrel. So I choose not to, but we always end up disagreeing on issues related to money or our child. The company we work for is quite large and has solid maternity and paternity leave systems in place.
So, returning to work after childbirth was smooth and I have no complaints about my job. My husband also works at the same company, but since our departments changed, after I returned from leave, we hardly ever meet in the office. Currently, my husband is in sales and I'm in HR. So, I understand that he has more obligations and often can't leave work on time. But still, I can't help but feel. My husband has never done the preschool drop-off and pick-up, not even once. Hey, couldn't you at least pick up our child once in a while?
That's your job, isn't it? Besides, I never wanted a child in the first place.
Our child is already born. It's pointless to say such things now.
They said that seeing the child's face after birth would make them seem cute. But that's a lie. I don't find them cute at all. They aren't even attached to me.
That's because you never play with them. You always pretend not to notice. When Kevin tries to talk to you,
I want to relax on my days off too. I can't be bothered to deal with a child.
our only son, Kevin, entered 4th grade this year. He's at an age where he understands a lot. Our son must have noticed his father's indifference towards him. My husband used to talk to him when he was little, but his responses were always dismissive.
Dad, you know what? What is it? I'm watching TV right now. Don't bother me. I'm sorry.
Hey, that's no way to talk.
Shut up. I'm tired from work every day. Unlike your HR job, sales require an incredible amount of consideration. Don't bother me on my day off.
This is how it always goes. My husband is completely hands-off when it comes to school events and parenting. He has never attended a school observation day or sports festival. It feels like we are a single-parent family. Our son has stopped initiating conversation with his father. Moreover, my husband never buys anything for our child, yet he spends recklessly on himself. So, naturally, my dissatisfaction with him just keeps growing. I don't want to nag him, but I find myself doing it anyway. There is a reason for this. When our child turned 3, I found out about my husband's debt. Since we both worked, we split living expenses in half. Therefore, I didn't know how my husband managed his salary. But after our child was born, our living expenses increased. As expected, our individual contributions increased as well. We had decided to deposit a set amount into a shared bank account for living expenses. Even though we only increased the amount by $200 compared to before our child was born, my husband often failed to deposit the money on the designated day. When I confronted him, I found out he had a debt from before our marriage. Moreover, the remaining balance was close to $30,000. When I asked what he had spent it on, how much he was paying monthly, and when he planned to pay it off, he just gave a vague smile and said it seemed like it would never end.
Well, I'm using a revolving payment system, so even if I make payments, the total amount doesn't decrease at all.
What? For a moment, I couldn't comprehend what he was saying. Essentially, he was spending more than his monthly payments. But because everything was put on revolving payments, the amount he had to pay remained the same. So for several years, the balance wasn't decreasing, it was actually increasing. I was infuriated at his lack of planning. I felt sorry for him because it seemed he didn't even realize he was a father. To prevent further reckless spending, I had all his credit cards stopped. He grumbled a lot, but I explained fervently that we couldn't afford any more debt. Eventually, I managed to convince him not to use them. It was a debt incurred for his luxuries, not for the family. It's only natural for an adult to handle their own mess. However, Because we wanted to repay it as soon as possible, we increased the monthly payment, which resulted in me covering most of the living expenses. 7 years have passed since then, and even though the payments have long since been completed, the amount of living expenses my husband contributes is still less than before. When I asked him to increase the living expenses, he refused, using the reason,
You earn more.
he insists that the one who earns more should contribute more, as if it's a matter of course in a family. His sales performance is not very good. He's always grumbling because his peers are progressing faster than him. So he's not dedicated to his job. That's why he's not getting promoted. 2 years ago, I was promoted to the head of the HR department. As a result, my salary is higher than my husband's, which he's not pleased about. I tried various ways to motivate him and even offered advice, but he didn't seem to appreciate that either.
What do you know about sales? Don't interfere unnecessarily.
With that, he wouldn't listen to anything I had to say. He would only argue, no matter what I said. Gradually, I got tired of it and stopped trying so hard to speak up. Then, one day, my husband announced he was going back to his hometown for a high school reunion. Even though he said he was going back, both of his parents had already passed away, and his elder brother and his wife lived in the family home. My husband and his brother-in-law don't get along well and have no interaction. The dispute over inheritance occurred when my father-in-law passed away 5 years ago. My brother-in-law and his wife had been taking care of my mother-in-law, who had required care for many years. My husband didn't lift a finger. Despite feeling guilty, I couldn't help out much due to my job, and since the birth of our child, I was basically managing things single-handedly. As a result, I could hardly show my face at my in-laws' house, and my mother-in-law passed away 3 years before my father-in-law. It was a year before my husband's death came to light. So, it seems that my father-in-law left a will leaving all his property to my brother-in-law and his wife. I thought it was only fair, and I told my husband it was fine. But he wasn't satisfied with that and made an outrageous claim. Eventually, it was settled that he would receive the reserved portion of the inheritance. But my brother-in-law was upset with my husband's attitude at the time. He told my husband that he would give him the reserved portion, but wanted nothing to do with him in the future. Knowing all this, I don't have the face to meet my brother-in-law and his wife, so I haven't contacted them at all since my father-in-law passed away. My husband used the money he received at that time to pay off the remaining debt. It turned out then that while he had said he couldn't put in living expenses because he was increasing the revolving payments, more than half the balance was still remaining. The claim of increasing the amount was a downright lie. He was just using the pretense of increasing the payments to avoid contributing to the living expenses, and instead using the money for his own entertainment. It was a ridiculous situation. When I complained, asking what was going on,
In the end, it was settled. So what's the problem? All this happened because you stopped my card and decreased the money I could use. I have no choice but to take the difference from the living expenses.
he said brazenly. Because of all this, I've been cut off from my brother-in-law. So even though he said he was going home, he shouldn't be able to stay at his family home. When I asked him where he was staying, he said he had booked a business hotel in front of the station. I thought it was rather sad that he was going back to his hometown, but he couldn't even show his face at the house where he was born and raised. I didn't say anything about it and just saw him off.
Dad is not coming home today.
Yeah, that's right. While I was seeing off my husband, who was cheerfully leaving, my son called out from behind. Moreover, he seemed somewhat happy knowing that his father wasn't coming home. I once again felt that for my son, his father was not a presence he wanted around. And I realized that I felt the same way. Today is Saturday, and I'm off from work, so why don't we go somewhere? Just the two of us, and eat out tonight.
Really?
Yeah.
Yay.
I began to think more and more that I should seriously consider the future. If I felt relieved that my husband wasn't around. But after the day of that reunion, my husband's outings clearly increased. Especially on holidays, he was often out and stayed out overnight. He was strangely in a good mood and carried his cell phone, which he used to leave on the table, everywhere. It seemed he even brought it into the bathroom. No matter how you look at it, it's suspicious. Hey, haven't you been going out a lot recently? Where on earth are you going?
I've been thinking about working out a bit, so I go to the gym on my days off. Once you hit your late 30s, your physical strength starts to decline.
Oh, is that so? Do gyms have accommodation facilities?
And no, not like that, but when I drink with friends on the way home, it becomes morning. When I'm feeling good, the drinks keep flowing.
I see. Are you working out to play sports with Kevin?
Yes, that's also possible.
His eyes are darting around, looking at him with a cold eye, thinking he could at least lie more skillfully. I was certain of my husband's infidelity in my mind. I could have hired a detective agency, but for now, I followed him on the days he went out. He got on the train and got off at the station where his parents' house was. At the station, a young woman was waiting in a car, and he happily got into the car. Since his behavior had changed since the reunion, I thought the other person was a former classmate. But the current woman looked clearly in her 20s, so it didn't seem that way. Still, I thought, he wastes money, he doesn't take care of the child, and on top of all that, an affair. I felt foolish for staying with him. I decided to break up with my husband and started preparing for it.
Well, I'm going. I might stay at a friend's house tonight.
Ah, okay. Take care. I thought it was a perfect opportunity. But just then, it was discovered that my credit card was missing from my wallet. I remember it being in my wallet until yesterday. I hadn't taken it out, so I didn't think I'd lost it somewhere. I immediately contacted the card company and reported it lost. When asked when I last used it, I couldn't remember, it had been a while. I had kept a record of my statement on my computer, so I checked that and answered. Unfortunately, it hadn't been used since then, so I was saved. I hadn't dropped it, and I hadn't even taken it out of my wallet. So why did I lose it? There's only one answer I can think of without even thinking about it. My husband had taken it from my wallet. There's no other explanation. I thought it was something he would do. For about the past 6 months, he's been receiving dunning letters from various credit card companies. Probably, his card was maxed out and he couldn't use it anymore. When my husband settled his debts, he had made a new card before I knew it. And more than one. I left it alone because I didn't feel like saying anything since my husband was going to be the one paying anyway. But to steal someone else's card, that's just plain theft. Anyway, I'm glad I noticed it early. I immediately started packing my husband's things. I know where my husband is. I had a detective agency find out who and where his mistress was. She's a 26-year-old woman living in the neighborhood of my husband's parents' house. A whole generation younger than my husband. According to the investigation report, she was divorced last year and had returned to her parents' home. She seems to have been working at the business hotel where my husband stayed when he went to the reunion, so that's probably where they met. They were already neighbors, so they knew each other by face, so the conversation probably bloomed. My husband is always at her parents' house. They've known each other since they were children, so it may be easy for him to visit. But I wonder if her parents know that he is still married and are letting him stay. Well, either way, it doesn't matter. I had my husband's luggage loaded onto the truck that soon arrived and sent it off. Now it's our turn. I've cancelled the credit card. Let's move too.
Yeah, sounds good.
My son seems overly excited. When I told him we would be living separately from his dad, he said, I fully agree. Just as my husband had long ceased to be a husband in my eyes, he had also long ceased to be a father in my son's eyes. I regretted not making this decision sooner. And by nightfall, we had moved into our new home. Of course, we completely cleared out the house we had been renting, turned off the water, gas, and electricity, and under the supervision of the real estate agent, returned the keys. As my son and I were discussing what to have for dinner, my husband called.
Hey, what's the meaning of this? Why are you sending my stuff? Everyone's in shock.
Well, you seem to be spending a lot of time there, so I thought it would be convenient for you to have your belongings.
Stop messing around. Thanks to you, Kelly's parents found out I'm still married. You included the divorce papers in the package. By the way, how did you know where I was?
I hired a detective agency to find out. The husband truly believed he hadn't been caught having an affair. How naive of him to underestimate me. Your behavior was blatantly obvious. I confirmed the affair, but I didn't want to bother investigating the identity of the woman because I have my own job, and I wanted concrete evidence.
Evidence?
If you want to get as much property division as possible, it's best to have evidence of the affair.
When I get home, you're gonna pay.
Go home. Where to?
To our house, obviously.
Oh, you still want to come home? That's a surprise. As my words implied, the husband seemed to have returned home the next day. He must have been shocked to see our completely empty house. I don't understand why he thought I'd still be there, after I'd sent him the completed divorce papers. And then today, he tried to use my credit card and was embarrassed when it didn't work. I reported the card as lost, so it's only natural that I filed a loss report. Oh, and I also reported a theft to the police while I was at it.
What?
The husband's voice went up an octave. It was obvious he was worried about being arrested. Well, I can't settle down unless he's worried to some extent. I did report it to the police, but unfortunately, because his family. I was told he can't be charged with theft. Furthermore, according to the credit card company, if a family member living with you uses the card, it's considered your responsibility, and you won't be exempted from the payment. I'm the one who has to pay. I'm glad I noticed before it was used. The husband's affair was proven, and the divorce went through smoothly. I reported the divorce to my company. Since my surname will change, it's customary to report the divorce as soon as possible. When I was asked why I was divorcing and casually said, because of my husband's infidelity, it quickly became known throughout the company. My ex-husband has been ostracized by his colleagues and is now seen with contempt. Besides, our company has strict ethical guidelines. So my ex-husband was transferred and is now working in a regional office. I used to pay most of the living expenses, so if he continues to spend money as before, he'll naturally run out. It seems he's finally realizing this. Plus, with the demotion and the resulting decrease in salary, plus child support, and payment for the splurge on his own credit card, He seems to be living a very poor life. He's been late on payments, his card has been suspended, and he's failed all the new card screenings, so he can't get a new one. He even contacted me to lower the child support. But that's none of my business, and I certainly won't do it. Of course, I flatly refused. Then he had the audacity to suggest we get back together because he broke up with his mistress. That's absolutely impossible. Don't ever contact me again, I said, and hung up. The ex-husband's mistress, who knew he was married but didn't tell her parents, and whose previous divorce was caused by her infidelity, was disowned by her parents and kicked out of her parents' house. Whether she got my contact information from my ex-husband or not, she called me directly and asked me to reduce the child support. But it's absolutely impossible for her to say such a thing to me in the first place. Of course, when I refused, she started crying and screaming on the other end of the line. Sigh. Experiencing divorce really makes me realize how difficult it is. But now, I'm living a very enjoyable life every day with my son. My son also seems to be much more carefree and happy than when my ex-husband was at home. If I think he was never there from the start, there won't be any expectations. And that really feels liberating. I plan to keep doing my best in both parenting and work from now on.